and we'll even have darshan of Jagannath deities, and we will have the abhishek for them also. So that's why tomorrow it will be difficult for me to have the program. So I'm very grateful that you could move the program to today, and I apologize if it has affected any of your timings and your schedules. And for those of you who can't make it today, not to worry, because in any event, it is being recorded by Dinavatsala Prabhu, who's very kind. So let's try to spend some time on this very important topic of Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev. I think the week before last, we remembered, having spent time remembering how Bhishmadev's pastime was in Bhagavatam. And if you recall carefully, you'll find that, his life was a very challenging life, because even though by nature he was a devotee of the Lord and he was fully and firmly having faith in Krishna, but because of his dharma and his duties, he had the challenge of actually being the grandsire of the Kuru dynasty. And therefore it was a challenge for him to maintain on one side his duties that he had to perform, and on the other side all the devotional sentiments that he felt as a devotee. Sometimes we are also placed in this situation in our lives where we may be in a vocation or a job which doesn't exactly align itself to the way we conduct ourselves as devotees. And sometimes we may think, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be sadhu, I'm supposed to be all these devotional qualities that are found in Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, but I have to face, and I have a work which inherently makes me or prevents me from being completely a devotee that I can. So how do I go about doing this? So Bhishmadev lived a challenging life. And at the end, because of his true Kshatriya spirit, you will realize at the last point when we've all met, we read and heard, how he finally decided that he would end his time on the Mahabharata battlefield on the 10th day. And on that day, he decided that it would be Arjuna, whom he had great affection for, great respect for, both as a grandchild, whom he saw as a great warrior. Bhishmadev was very proud of Arjuna, even though he was in the opposite camp. But he wanted only Arjuna's arrows to be the cause of his leaving the battlefield and eventually of his leaving the world. So all these arrows that you see in this picture, they are all the arrows that have been shot by Arjuna. And these were the arrows that pierced Bhishmadev. And because his father had given him a boon, if you remember, of how he can choose the time of his death, so Bhishmadev decided that even though I will not participate in the Mahabharata war, I have decided that I will stop now. And I will fall because of Arjuna's arrows. And eventually, when I leave this body, the world will record it as the reason being that I left it on account of all the shots and arrows that were pierced into my body and armor by the great warrior Arjuna. So this was Bhishmadev's way of glorifying another devotee, and that devotee is Arjuna. For a devotee of the Lord, a very important point is there. Sometimes devotees may have differences. Bhishmadev was in one camp, but Arjuna was in the other camp. But it did not mean that they did not feel affection for each other, because the connection between both Bhishmadev and Arjuna was not just a familial affection, but deeper than that. It was an affection because they were both having Krishna in the center of their lives. Even though Bhishmadev had to perform his duties on the side of the Kauravas, in heart he was a great devotee of the Lord. And that is why very often, whenever advice was asked from him, even on the battlefield, he constantly advised the Kauravas to stop fighting. And he constantly advised the Kauravas that because they were not on the side of the Lord and not moving according to the plan of Krishna, they will therefore have to suffer defeat. He also advised the Kauravas many times that because the Kauravas were actually offending the great devotees of the Lord, like Pandavas, they would have to pay for it very severely at the end of the war. So Bhishmadev and Arjuna may have been on opposite sides of the field, but they were actually connected in their devotion to Krishna. And that's why, Prabhus and Matajis, we are all here today. If you think about it, all of us who are participating now, what is it that connects us? We have different jobs, we have different backgrounds, we come from different parts of India, we don't even speak the same language except for English maybe, we have different traditions and cultures, our work demands are different, but the connecting point for us is Srimad Bhagavatam. The connecting point for us is Krishna. And that's why we are now in the company of each other. So this is a very important point. The relationship between the devotees should transcend material misgivings and material challenges. The relationship between devotees must always transcend these challenges and come to a spiritual platform. On that platform, even the arrows that were piercing, the arrows that were piercing Bhishmadev were not painful for him. They were considered like petals of rose flowers and garlands. He took them bravely like a Kshatriya, but he wore them well because they came from a devotee. And that's an important thing. So now we come to the second part today of our time spent with Bhishmadev in the 9th chapter of the first canto. And in the first part, we actually try to understand him from Bhagavatam's perspective of his story, of how he lived his life, and how it came to the point of the Mahabharat war where he decided to give up his life. But now a very important part in Bhagavatam about Bhishmadev is also what he will instruct the devotees. And his instructions form the major part of the 9th canto of the the 9th chapter of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. So today actually, we are not really speaking about pastime because he's passing his time now on the bed of arrows. He's not going to move. But the conversation that he will have now with the Pandavas and Krishna are very important. Now, there's so much of instructions of Bhishmadev in that chapter, and we will never have the time to cover it. Maybe if we met each other, we could take one verse each time we discussed it. But today, we have decided that we will take the essence of the verses, which will be found in 5 shlokas, or 5 prayers, or 5 instructions that Bhishmadev gives. And these 5 instructions, today we will discuss them. So this today is actually to understand what Bhishmadev is trying to tell us. Let's give some context to our discussion. In this discussion today, Yudhishthira Maharaj, after the Mahabharat war ended, the Kauravas were decimated. Not only were the Kauravas decimated, but we understand that there was hardly anyone left. All the Kauravas, were gone. And Duryodhana was left to die also. Only Dhritarashtra was standing up together with Gandhari. And the Pandavas had won the war, and the battle and the result of the battle was decisive. After the whole scene of the massacre unfolded before Yudhishthira Maharaj felt very bad. Yudhishthira Maharaj, his name, he's known also as Ajata Shastru, which means one who has no enemy in this world. By nature, Yudhishthira Maharaj could not find someone as an enemy, could not see someone as an enemy. That was how virtuous he was. So this war was very difficult for him to fight. It was easier, for example, for Bhima to fight this war, because Bhima was Kshatriya, and he had this capacity to kill. He was full of passion. But Yudhishthira Maharaj, it was difficult. So Yudhishthira Maharaj then decided that he would go to the scene of the massacre, because he and the Pandavas all wanted to see Bhishmadev, because they knew that Bhishmadev was waiting for that period of time known as Uttarayana, when the sun moves, from one hemisphere to the other hemisphere, and is considered an auspicious time to leave. So Bhagavatam tells us that at that time, his brothers, the Pandavas, followed him on beautiful chariots, and these chariots were driven by first-class horses, and the horses had gold ornaments. And not only were not only was Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas there, but Bhagavatam tells us even Vyasadev and great rishis, like Dhaumya, the learned priests of the Pandavas, they also came. Bhagavatam tells us that many exalted personalities also came. not only were Vyasadeva and Dhaumya there, but even Krishna himself had come. And Krishna came together with the Pandavas because he also wanted to pay respect to the grandsire of this dynasty. Yudhishthira Maharaj looked very aristocratic, and he looked as if he was Kuvera, surrounded by his companions. Bhagavatam tells us that when they all saw Bhishma lying on the ground, he looked like a Devata who had fallen from the sky. When someone is about to die in this material world, they don't look very nice. They look very sad. They look a pale shadow of themselves. But Bhagavatam tells us because Bhishmadev was such a great devotee, he actually was very powerful. And even at the point of his deathbed, he was actually looking very effulgent. And so the Pandava king Yudhishthira, along with his younger brothers and Krishna, they all bowed down before Bhishmadev. And not only were they there, Bhagavatam tells us all the great souls of the universe, even the great rishis, they were all assembled there. Some of the great rishis who came, their names are given in Bhagavatam. Parvata Muni, Narada, Dhaumya, Vyasadev, Brihadashva, Bharadwaj, Parashuram and his disciples, the great sage Vashishta, Indra Pramada, Trita, Gritsamada, Asita, Kakshivan, Gautami, Atri, Kaushika, Sudarshana, they were all present. Even Shukadev Goswami, the speaker of Bhagavatam, and the other souls like Kashyap and Angiraj, they were also there, and their disciples were also there. So it was a big assembly, just like the time when Parikshit Maharaj was going to leave the world, if you remember. In the same way, so many great personalities and souls, they came to see Bhishmadev leave. And they knew that Bhishmadev was such a great person that they wanted to hear him. This is a very important point for devotees. We are gathered here on a Thursday afternoon because we want to exercise one important devotional principle, Shravanam. Shravanam means to hear. What did they want to hear? They wanted to hear about Krishna, and they wanted to hear from a devotee of Krishna. Because a devotee of Krishna will only speak what Krishna is speaking. And that's why they wanted to be there. Now, how did Bhishmadev receive them? He was on a bit of arrows, and he must have been in so much pain. But when he saw all of them there, Bhagavatam says that he welcomed all of them. And at that point of time, Krishna himself being there was like the crest jewel of all of those persons there. And Bhishmadev became so happy to see Krishna because Bhishmadev always knew the real identity of Krishna. He knew his glories, and therefore Bhishmadev worshipped Krishna in his heart. The Pandavas were sitting very silently. They were overtaken with affection and grief for their dying grandfather. When Bhishmadev saw this, he also had great feelings for them. He congratulated them on their victory. See what a great Kshatriya and what a great devotee he is. A devotee is never grudging in the face of loss. Neither is he proud in the face of victory. For a devotee, victory and loss in this material world are just two parts, two sides of the same coin, because they represent the duality of this material existence. So he was not begrudging. He did not say, how could you have killed everyone? Because he knew it was a war. And war means someone will fight and someone will win and someone will lose. And when he saw that the Pandavas were sitting down and looking very forlorn, there were tears of ecstasy that came to Bhishmadev's eyes because he was overwhelmed by love and affection for them. This is such a wonderful scene, as you can imagine, because all the great personalities were there. But Bhishmadev was such a sterling person in character. And so after having seen Bhishmadev there, Bhishmadev now began to speak. And these are exact verses that we have taken from Bhagavatam. So we thought it would be very authentic and nice to share these verses with you. This is the first thing Bhishmadev said to especially to the Pandavas, because he had special affection for them. So he said this, Aho kastam aho anyayam, yad yuyam dharma nandanaha, jivitum narharta klishtam, vipra dharma achyutta ashrayaha. And the translation is very nice. Bhishmadev said, "Oh, what terrible sufferings and what terrible injustices all of you have suffered. You're good souls, and you're all sons of religion personified. You're all exemplary characters. But how much of tribulation and suffering you suffered from the time you grew up and you became powerful kings. You became the great source of envy to the Kauravas, especially Duryodhana. So you did not deserve to remain alive because Duryodhana and the Kauravas hatched so many plans to kill the Pandavas. And Bhishmadev is saying, actually, technically speaking, you should have just died in your suffering. But you were protected. And what were the three things that protected you? And these three things are very nicely stated by Bhishmadev. One, Vipra, Brahmanas. Brahmanas do not just mean that we are just born into Brahmana family. Brahmana means the character of a Brahmana, not the thread of a Brahmana, but the character of a Brahmana. The Brahmanas are very dear to Krishna because they are devotees of the Lord. They have dedicated their lives to him. A Brahmana doesn't need to be a Brahmana according to the caste system today. Anyone who is remembering Krishna and practicing bhakti, he has all the qualities of a Brahmana inherent in him. So Bhishmadev was saying that you were protected by the devotees. Why? Because all the devotees, they prayed for your protection. In fact, even Bhishmadev was always the well-wisher of the Pandavas. And even he prayed for their protection, even though he was on the other side. The second thing that protected the Pandavas despite all their trials and tribulations was God himself. And he is known as Achyuta, one who cannot fall. Achyuta means one who cannot fall. And that is Krishna. And the third thing that protected him, that protected the Pandavas, was actually dharma. Dharma means, in one sense, religion, but it also means spiritual principles. Because the Pandavas followed the spiritual principles, they were protected. So this is a very important point that we must understand. From 1.9.12, what is our takeaway? Our takeaway is that even great devotees suffer in this world. And by suffering, they show us that even though we can take up bhakti, even though we try to lead good lives, it is not that we will be guaranteed that we will not suffer in this world. But despite all the challenges that we may receive in our work, in our family, with our children, sometimes, we are faced with so many difficulties while bringing children up, facing our bosses at the work, trying to just make out a living in life. So many things are challenging us. But Bhishmadev says that Pandavas, you survived all that because three things you took shelter of. And that is Bhishmadev's first advice to us. As long as we take shelter of the devotees of the Lord, as long as we take shelter of the Lord himself, and as long as we take shelter of his instructions, somehow or another we will be protected. Now Bhishmadev goes on and he says something very interesting. Yes. Now he says, Sarva kalam krita manye, bhavatam chayat apriyam, shapalo yad vashe loko, vayur iva ganavalihi. This is a very important point. He says, in my opinion, all these difficulties that you have had, in my opinion, all the difficulties that you have had is only because of one reason. And the reason is the powerful nature of time in this world. This is the opinion of Bhishmadev. Bhishmadev then first set out the problem that the Pandavas faced. And then he says very nicely, do you want to know why you had all these challenges? Because in this world, there's such a thing called time. And time is very powerful. And when, according to time, everyone has to go through good things or not so good things in this world. And so, time is a powerful element that you must consider. Then Bhishmadev advised Yudhishthira Maharaj. And these are some points we can take. And this is given to us by Srila Prabhupada in Srimad Bhagavatam. Prabhupada tells us in these purports that the nature of time is that it is so powerful, it can control the space, the universe, even the planets. All the planets are orbiting according to a certain time. They are orbiting according to a certain regulation, a certain rhythm. So time is not just regulating us, time is regulating the world. Then it is also stated that time is so powerful that it even controls the actions of air and elements. Why is it that sometimes, according to time, some things happen that disturbs the elements around us? Because it is time. Everything, therefore, is moving on the platform of time. Our actions, our reactions, our behavior. What we have done 10,000 years ago to the environment on the platform of time is now living out in the environment today. If we have disturbed the planet Earth, Bhumi Devi, on the platform of time 50 years ago, time doesn't forget. And in time, the consequence of that action will come. It will come. So Bhagavatam tells us that time is something we should never take for granted. And Bhishmadev told Yudhishthira Maharaj, do not be sorry when something happens that you do not want, but it happens because it is time that it has happened. And then he gives a very nice point here. Everyone has to bear the actions and reactions of time. As long as you're in this material world, time will start. The moment you're born, time is running already. Now, some of us are 40, some are 50, some are even 60. Time is running. And even the most pious persons in this world, they have to suffer the conditions of this material world because it is the nature of this world. But despite the challenges of time, despite the challenges of calamities, despite the difficulties posed by time, a devotee is always guided. A pious man is always guided. How is he guided? He's guided because one, he has faith in the hand of the Lord. And he's guided by following the instructions of the Lord. This is a very important point. That is why all our acharyas tell us that while for someone who has no faith in the concept of time, or even faith in the concept of the nature of this material world, these people can sometimes become disturbed by the tricks of eternal time. Even Brahmaji, such a great devotee, has to come under the control of time. So Bhagavatam tells us, when time is good, you should remember Krishna. And when time is not good, you should also remember Krishna. But don't blame time for this. We should not begrudge time, because the moment we are born into this world, we are all moving on that conveyor belt and we can't get out of it. So then what is the advice of Bhishmadev? Bhishmadev is just looking at the Pandavas. Imagine the scene. He's looking at them, and he's saying, Yatra dharmo suto rajan, gadapani vikrodara, krishnostri gandivam chapam, sruhat krishna tato vipat. And he's saying, how wonderful is the influence of time? It is irreversible. Otherwise, how can there be reverses? When King Yudhishthir Maharaj was there, such a powerful personality, he is the son of Yamaraj who controls Dharma. Bhima, you were the great fighter with the club, and yet you had to suffer. Arjuna, you are the greatest bowman. You had the mighty weapon Gandiva. You were blessed by all the great personalities, and yet you had to go through exile. And you were all put into difficulty with your mother Kunti, despite the fact that Krishna was always your companion and he was your well-wisher. This tells us the nature of time in this world. And the nature of time, Bhagavatam tells us, is two things. It is very influential, meaning to say time is subtle. You never know how time passes. Sometimes it passes very slowly. Sometimes it passes very fast. Sometimes you tell yourself, okay, I have 3 more days to complete an assignment. Before you know it, 3 more days have gone. So time is considered to be subtle. But it is also irreversible. Bhishmadev is saying that whatever that has happened now has happened. Whatever that you went through for 13 years of exile, you have gone through it. Accept it and learn from it. That is how we conquer time. We conquer time when we learn the lessons given to us by time. And we learn to also accept time when we understand that we must be humble, because time is something that we cannot conquer. And very often, it is time that conquers us. So now, It's a very important point that Bhishmadev is telling us. Time is the manifestation of Krishna in this world. If you all read with Suman Prabhu Bhagavad Gita, you'll remember one very important point. In the 11th chapter, when Krishna exhibits his universal form, his Virat Roop, at one point, he seems to be devouring the whole world. And Arjuna looks up at him and he becomes very fearful and he prays to the Lord. And at the end of it, the Lord himself says, Arjuna, time I am, destroyer of this world. So Krishna comes in the form of his beautiful form of Krishna. But in this material world, he also takes another form. He takes the form of time. So that's why Bhishmadev says very nicely here that the Pandavas had so much of spiritual resources. They had so much of material resources. They had two great warriors like Bhima and Arjuna. The king Yudhishthira Maharaj was the symbol of religion itself. Krishna was their well-wisher, and always he was there, always looking out for them. And yet, they had so many sufferings. If they had so many sufferings, how much more sufferings we should be ready to accept? So despite the power of personalities, despite the power of expert management, despite the power of all their weaponry, despite being under the direct supervision of Krishna, the Pandavas appeared to suffer so many practical reverses. Why? Because Bhishmadev said it was because of time. Now you may be wondering, is time so powerful? How do we counter time then? How do we get out of this terrible manifestation of time? By understanding this last point on the slide. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita declares time to be identical with him. Therefore, the influence of Kala, time, is actually the inexplicable wish of the Lord himself. And therefore, Bhishmadev is trying to tell Yudhishthira Maharaj, I know the Mahabharat war was terrible. I know so many things happened here which you don't want to and try to avoid. But this Mahabharat war was eventually the wish of the Lord himself through the force of time. And there is nothing to be lamented when a matter is beyond the control of any human being. Have you seen how, Prabhus and Matajis, many things in our life we can control to a certain extent. But there comes a time in our life and our situations where very often there are some things that are just beyond us. Take, for example, disease. We may treat some diseases, they go away. But there will come a time in our lives when there will be a disease that just doesn't go away. The doctors try, we try Ayurveda, we try allopathy, and finally we realize that this is time. It is the inexplicable wish of the Lord. So sometimes you may endeavor very hard in this world, but you have nothing to lament when you have tried everything you can. And when the matter is beyond your control, you must surrender to time. The Pandavas tried everything they could to avoid this war. Krishna tried everything he could as an example to the world. He tried diplomacy, he spoke to them, but ultimately Krishna knew he gave them a choice because we all have a choice. Even though time is so powerful, we still have an individual choice. And with that choice, we can decide whether we want to flow with Krishna, who is time, or we want to flow away from Krishna. So Bhishmadev was giving a very nice advice to the Pandavas. Even though the situation is very bad, you were protected by Krishna. You were protected by the devotees. And you were protected by Dharma. But now you must accept that you have to now rule the kingdom. And this is a very important verse here that is very important to understand the mood and attitude of a devotee. All of you, when you face a challenge in life. Bhagavatam is so practical, We cannot say that we live in a world where we face no challenge. So Bhagavatam puts devotees in situations where they have to face challenges. But how they face them is a lesson for us. Not that they were imperfect, but like actors on a stage trying to prove a point, the devotees are actors and the supreme director is Krishna. And through them, he tries to show us how to live life in this world. Tatte nukampam sushamikshamano bunjana evatmakritam vipakam hridvagvapurvir Vidadan namaste. Jivetayo mukti pade sadaya bhav. The translation is very nice. My dear Lord, one who earnestly waits for you to bestow your causeless mercy upon him, all the while patiently suffering the reactions of his past misdeeds and offering you respectful obeisances with his heart, with his words, and with his deeds, his body. That person becomes eligible for liberation, for it has become his rightful claim. This is the mood of a devotee. A devotee may be suffering, but you will never see the Pandavas or Kunti Mata complaining. They never complain to Krishna, Krishna, I now reject you because we are suffering so much. No, they were patient in their suffering because they understood that somewhere in this there is a lesson for us. And they all were so humble as devotees that they saw it as a reaction to their past misdeeds. Why blame others? When we are faced with a challenge, the general mood in this world is that we try to find some blame on someone and we just move all that difficulty to that person and say, it's your fault, you deal with it. But a devotee doesn't think that way. A devotee says, well, if the matter has come to me, it must be because of something I've done before. The devotee gains ownership and responsibility over his or her own actions. You remember Parikshit Maharaj? After he put the garland of date snake around Shamika Rishu, as he walked away, did he say, what I've done is right? No. He said, what I've done is not right. And therefore the consequences will come. And that's what a devotee believes. A devotee doesn't blame anyone. And by not blaming anyone, we actually save so much time. If you want time to study shlokas and do bhakti, you need time for it. And if we spend so much time blaming others and trying to feel that we are all right, nothing is wrong with us, then we don't have time for Krishna because we will always play the blame game. But this verse is a very wise verse actually, because it tells us first, when you are faced with difficulty, don't become agitated. Be patient. Those who are patient, they can withstand any difficulty. But their attitude for patience is very important. Their attitude is that they see the hand of Krishna. Parikshit Maharaj saw the hand of Krishna in the form of a Brahmana's curse. And Bhishmadev is advising Yudhishthira Maharaj, please see the hand of Krishna in how the outcome of the war has come. Because Yudhishthira Maharaj did not want to become a king. He said, I'm not qualified. This war is finished. I'm not qualified. That's what he felt. But Bhishmadev was telling him not to reject his duty. And this is another nice verse that tells us how we should view challenges in life. This verse appears later in the 4th canto, 19th chapter. It's spoken by Lord Brahma to Prithu Maharaj. And we'll study Prithu Maharaj. Very interesting story. But the story basically is that Indra was the proprietor of 100 Rajasuya sacrifices. No one in the universe had surpassed him. But Prithu Maharaj was going to come to 100. And Indra tried to stop him. And even though he tried very hard, Prithu Maharaj became outraged. And he was competing with Indra. And in all the competition, Krishna was forgotten. And so Brahma came to Prithu and told him this very nice advice. Masmin Maharaj krita smachintam nishamayasmad vacha adritatma yadhyayato dhaiva hatam nukartum mano turishtam vishate tamo andam. And the translation is very nice. My dear king, do not be agitated or anxious because your sacrifice have not been properly executed. It is due to providential impediment. Kindly take my words with great respect. We should always remember that if something happens by providential arrangement, we should not be very, very sorry. The more we try to rectify such reversals, the more we enter into the darkest regions of materialistic thought. In other words, sometimes even religious and saintly persons will definitely meet with reversals in life. It is not that the devotees are immune to problems. No, problems keep coming. But they see the hand of Krishna and the hand of time. That is the meaning of the word providential. Even though there are sufficient causes for making one unhappy, Bhagavatam's advice and Bhishmadev's advice is, don't try to counteract it, an eye for an eye, tit for tat, because you implicate yourself further in this material world. And so the nice point that Bhishmadev concludes here is, we should tolerate things instead of becoming agitated. And how do we tolerate it? We tolerate it by improving our own bhakti, by spending more time chanting Krishna's names, hearing about Krishna, singing his glories, doing service. In that way, Krishna himself will give us tolerance. And whatever things that come to us, will be able to withstand the agitation. Now Bhishmadev goes on to the second point today. The first point was about reversals and the power of time. Now he comes to the second advice to the Pandavas. He tells Yudhishthira Maharaj specifically, because he uses the word O king, Nahi asya karhichit rajan, puman veda vidit sitam, yad vijigna saya yukta, muyanti kavayo pihi. Now he says something very interesting. He says, my dear King Yudhishthira, just remember one thing. No one can know the plan of the Lord. Even though great munis and rishis, are trying to inquire all the time, they themselves are sometimes bewildered. So the question we have now is, how does one know the plan of the Lord? If we say that the Lord has a plan for everyone, how do we know what is the plan that the Lord has for us? The plan of the Lord is actually as good as the Lord himself. This is a very important point. You must never forget that the nature of God is that he is absolute. If you chant his name, it is as good as seeing him. If you remember his pastime, it is as good as chanting his name. Every part of the Lord is complete. I always give the example, if you chant Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola for our 20-minute kirtans every day, all of you will shut down and leave Zoom. Why? Because that kind of chanting is not absolute. Coca-Cola doesn't come to you in your household and you drink it. And after a while, it gets dry. But if you chant Krishna's names, because Krishna and his name are non-different, immediately Krishna is in your tongue when you chant. Immediately he's in your heart when you chant. And so the plan of the Lord, the name of the Lord, is as good as the Lord himself. Please keep this in mind. So what Bhishmadev was trying to say is that Yudhishthira Maharaj should not become bewildered. Do not become discouraged. Bhishma wanted to tell Maharaj Yudhishthira that from the beginning of time, it is very difficult to know the plan of Krishna. Even the great devotees sometimes don't know the plan. So how can we understand it? So Bhishmadev was trying to tell Yudhishthira Maharaj that you must be humble. And you must understand that at the end of the day, the Lord has a plan. And the plan now is that the Lord wanted to establish this kingdom as a kingdom of virtue. And therefore, he wanted his own devotees to suffer temporarily. Why? Because in this world, if you want to achieve something great, sometimes suffering is necessary. Because suffering is a test of our faith in God. Sometimes if you want to hang a picture, or if you can see behind me, you see a mirror, right? Now, if you want to hang that mirror up, it's quite heavy. You need to drill 2 holes. And after you drill them in, what do? You shake them to just test whether they're all right. That testing is necessary. Because if you don't do that and you hang the mirror there and it's not strong, the mirror collapses, the glass shatters. So very often, the good Lord, when we surrender to him as devotees, the good Lord very often wants to test our faith. And he will test our faith in so many different ways. And he will test it through difficulties and challenges where our faith, just like that nail, has to be tested. Is it strong? Are we patient enough? Are we very agitated to the point where we cannot see the hand of the Lord? Or are we strong enough to have dependence on the Lord and have the ability to have faith in him. So that's why very often you will see that in the whole of Bhagavatam, in all the scriptures you find, the devotees never had a cushy life. Very often they had to face so many trials. But Bhishmadev was very happy. Even though he faced so much trials in his life, and he was now lying on a bed of arrows, he was so glad to tell Yudhishthira Maharaj, Yudhishthira, I am so satisfied that finally virtue has triumphed over vice. And you are the right person to sit on the throne. And remember, Bhishmadev did this even though Yudhishthira Maharaj was technically speaking his enemy on the other side. This shows you one important quality of Bhishmadev. He himself accepted the outcome of the war as the plan of the Lord. He accepted it. And that's why Bhishmadev is known as a humble servant of the Lord. Our acharyas tell us something very nice. Even a great fighter like Bhishmadev could not win the battle of Kurukshetra. Why? Because Shastras tell us that the Lord wanted to show that vice cannot conquer virtue, regardless of whoever tries to execute it. Bhishmadev was no doubt a great devotee of the Lord, but he chose to fight against the Pandavas by the will of the Lord, because the Lord wanted to show that a fighter like Bhishmadev cannot win if he's on the wrong side. So the Lord has this great ability to teach us through great devotees. And by putting Bhishmadev on the other side, he showed the world that you may be a great warrior, but if you are not aligned with my plan, you must fail. But because Bhishmadev was actually a devotee of the Lord, he was ready to accept, just like Vritasur was ready to accept defeat. Bhishmadev was ready to accept defeat because he had a higher goal. The higher goal was that ultimately he wanted to fix his mind, his heart, and his body on the form of Krishna. And he wanted Krishna to be actually the chosen Lord in his heart. And so this is a very important reason why devotees sometimes are put into difficulty. Because we very often become the instruments of the Lord. And this is stated by Krishna in the 11th chapter, 33rd verse of Bhagavad Gita. Tasmat tvam utishta yasho labasvya jitva shatrun bungsva rajyam samriddham mayai vaite nihata purvam eva nimitta matram bhavya savyasachi. Krishna tells Arjuna in the 11th chapter, get up, Arjuna. Utishta, get up. Prepare to fight. Win glory. Conquer your enemy. Enjoy the flourishing kingdom. Why? Because by my arrangement, the war has already been decided. All you have to do is become an instrument in my fight. So Bhagavad Gita tells us that Krishna calls Arjuna in this verse as Savyasachi. Savyasachi means one who's very expert on the field. But Krishna was warning Arjuna, you may be very expert at shooting arrows, but ultimately I decide the outcome of the war. We may be very expert in doing something, but do we always achieve the result we want? Supposing I was the expert lawyer, will I win every case? No. Experience from me will tell you that sometimes the best cases that I think I'm going to win, I will lose. And sometimes the cases I'm very sure I'm going to lose, I win. Because it is a way for us to understand that whatever we win or we lose is very often decided on the platform of time. If we are not devotees, we come under the law of karmas and we have to suffer action and reaction. If we are devotees, the law of karma is still there because we are in the material world. But Krishna softens the blow. He gives us the ability to be conscious of him, to see his hand, to allow him to test that nail before he can put that mirror in our heart, before he can frame himself in our heart, so that when he frames himself in our heart, it becomes strong and we are able to have faith in him. So a very important quality of a devotee that Bhishmadev was instructing Yudhishthira Maharaj. And by doing that, he was also telling himself what he must feel is to become an instrument. You know, the beauty of an instrument like a knife, for example, in the hand of a surgeon, the knife is useful, saves lives. But in the hands of a murderer, the knife can kill. But the knife is an instrument. So do we want to become an instrument to material life? Or do we want to become an instrument to spiritual life? If we become an instrument to spiritual life, then we depend on Krishna and we are guided by him. Why? Because this whole world is moving not according to accidental formations. It's actually moving according to a plan. And this plan is actually the plan of the Lord. Bhagavatam tells us that this whole material world has been created not because Krishna wanted it, but because we wanted to be separate from Krishna. But this material world, this human form of life, represents a chance to go back to Krishna. It represents a chance for us to stop claiming things that don't belong to us, because even the sharir doesn't belong to us. But to use whatever we have, our wealth, our abilities, the facilities we have, use it for Krishna. Now there are how many participants? There are 16 of you here, maybe more if you're sitting together. But you are using one valuable component of this world for Krishna. Your time, for which I'm very grateful for. You have decided not to use this time for anything else. So you're using it for Krishna. And therefore you please Krishna. And therefore anyone who sincerely and humbly wishes to understand the plan of the Lord, they can actually understand his plan in two ways. One, follow his instructions, because his instructions are his plans. And two, follow the instructions of his great devotees. If you follow the instructions of his great devotees, the great devotees know the mind of the Lord, and therefore they will follow him. And even if they don't know the plan of the Lord will reveal the plan to them. In Bhagavad Gita, it is nicely stated, Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayantite. It's in the 10th chapter, 10th verse, one of the 4 Chatur shlokas. Krishna tells to Arjuna, anyone who is devoted to me, I will give them from the heart the understanding and the intelligence by which to come to me. In other words, if we are fixed in bhakti, Krishna will reveal that plan to us. How do we do it? By following his instructions. And the moment we follow instructions, it means we align ourselves. But the moment we don't align ourselves, there's no connection, because there is misalignment. So Bhagavad Gita tells us very nicely, Nastir buddhir ayuktasya ya cha yuktasya bhavana na cha bhavayata shantir ashantasya kutaha sukham. If someone is not connected to the Supreme Lord, then two things will elude them. One is transcendental intelligence, and second is a steady mind. In other words, if we are disturbed at any point of time, it's a very good litmus test for us to reflect on ourselves and ask ourselves, am I disturbed because at some point of time, I'm not aligned to the vision of the Lord? Am I following his instructions? Am I doing the things that would please him? If you are, you will feel the possibility of peace. Ravana was so powerful, he had everything. Hiranyakashipu was super powerful, he had everything. He enjoyed everything. But was he peaceful? No. Could he get a good sleep? No. Because he was always hankering for something more and more and more. And in the end, even when he got everything, he was afraid that the Supreme Lord would fight him. And therefore, he tried to kill his son, Prahlad. Kamsa tried to kill Krishna. But in the end, where was the possibility of peace for Kamsa, for Hiranyakashipu, for Ravana? There was no possibility of peace because there was no connection. When you have connection with the Lord, it is the most natural thing in the world, because it is a connection between a father and son, father and daughter. It's very, very, very natural. And therefore, if you're connected, you will know the mind and the heart of your father. Isn't it true? For those of you who are taking care of your parents, spending time with them, I'm reminded of Sanjeev Prabhu, who takes such good care of his father. You will know after serving your parents that after a while they reveal to you what pleases them. They reveal to you their hearts. They reveal to you their plans. Even in this material world, if you love someone and serve them with dedication and with your heart, you gain a connection to them. And with that connection, your mind is peaceful because the relationship is there. Even if they are difficult sometimes, and that's true of the nature of the material world, still through that difficulty also, you will come to understand what is it in their hearts, what is it in their minds. So actually, it's a very practical point. The foundation for peace is establishing a connection. Even in mundane relationships, when you have a deep connection, the relationship is very peaceful. It's also very blissful. But when there's no connection and no meeting of the heart and mind, how can there be a possibility of peace? Because the mind is disturbed. So the first way to know the plan of the Lord is to sincerely follow his instructions. What happens if we can't follow? Sometimes people ask. It's all right. Krishna is interested in how hard you are trying. He's not interested in the result. Result is up to him. But he's interested in how sincerely we try. So that's a very important point. And that's why the Bhagavad Gita tells us, until we are conscious of God, there's no possibility of peace. Until we are conscious of our relationship with the Supreme Father, it's very hard for us to know our purpose of life. And that is why we must always remember that while we possess everything, he is the true proprietor of everything. We may possess something, but it doesn't mean it belongs to us. Possession of something doesn't mean ownership. Even in legality and law, it is like that. And it is true in the spiritual world and the material world. So that's why if you do not understand and cement your relationship with the Lord, then you will have disturbance. And disturbance is due because we don't have a goal. Why Bhishmadev was so peaceful on the bed of arrows? He was so peaceful on the bed of arrows because his goal of life was Krishna. And that is why he was just waiting there, speaking Bhagavatam and waiting for his time to come. And his mind was very steady, and therefore he was very peaceful. And this is the royal road to peace that Bhishmadev showed. He had a difficult life, if you remember. But by the end of his time, because he was always fixed and he always had a goal, that goal was before him now, and it was Krishna. So that is why Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada tells us so nicely, Krishna consciousness or God consciousness is a self-manifested peaceful condition. You don't need an external thing to make you happy when you have Krishna inside the heart. Bhishmadev was struck with arrows, but because he had Krishna in his heart, he didn't feel the pain. The arrows came from the devotee, Arjuna, whom he loved, and therefore he could tolerate the pain. So that is why spirit is so important compared to matter. And as we wind down our time together today, the second way to understand the plan of the Lord is to understand it through his devotees. And this is very nicely stated in this purport of 1134. The purport is so nice. Every plan is made by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But he's so kind and merciful to his devotees that he wants to give the credit to his devotees who carry out his plan according to his desire. So all credit today is given to Arjuna and the Pandavas for winning the war. But actually the truth is, this was in alignment with the plan of the Lord. But the Lord doesn't want credit, but he loves to give credit to devotees. And that's why in the purport it is stated, we should lead our life in such a way that all of us act in God consciousness and we understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the medium of our spiritual master, meaning the other devotees of the Lord. It's only when we connect to exalted devotees of the Lord, they understand the plan and they can share the plan with us. And it is nicely stated, the plans of the devotees are as good as the plan of the Lord. Whatever a devotee prays for, it will come to pass. This is the greatness of Krishna. When a devotee prays to Krishna to please take care of another devotee, Krishna becomes bound to the devotee out of love, and he will take care of him. When Narada Muni saw the two sons of Kuvera, Nala Kuvera and Manigriva, and they were wasting their time in inebriation, he prayed to Krishna that somehow Krishna give them mercy. And then he cursed them. It looked really bad because they were supposed to become trees. But because the trees were growing in Nanda Maharaj's courtyard, Krishna would come and liberate them. So when we pray to the great devotees of the Lord and seek their blessings, Krishna becomes very pleased. And through their plans, he endorses us. Another nice example is in Ramayana. Vibhishana, the brother of Ravana, moved camp and came over to the mainland, and he presented himself before Lord Ram. He had 4 other Rakshasas with him. They were the only ones who came with him. But Sugriva and Hanuman were so untrusting, with good reason, because they thought Vibhishana would be a spy. And they spent many hours interrogating him. But at the end, when Lord Ram came out and embraced Vibhishana, they accepted Vibhishana. After so much of trials that Vibhishana had to endure, Vibhishana walked into the camp. Now the 4 Rakshasas who were behind, they were sitting silently and waiting. The moment Vibhishana went through, the 4 of them started walking. And Hanumanji stopped them and said, "Who are you?" And they said, "We are following him." And the moment Hanumanji realized that they were aligned with a great devotee like Vibhishana, who was accepted by the Lord, without hesitation, he said, "You may go. You may go." And that is our hope. We may not be great devotees, but if we hold on to the lotus feet of great devotees, then they can actually petition on our behalf. And now Bhishmadev winds down his final instructions. He tells now to the Pandavas, "Tasmadidam daiva tantram vyavasya bharata rishabha tasya anuvihitaha anatha na tapahi praja prabho." So he tells Yudhishthira Maharaj, "My dear Yudhishthir, all that has happened, we may have been a part of it, but ultimately it is the plan of the Lord. You please accept the plan of the Lord, and now you must follow it. Become a king, become the appointed administrative head, and take care of your subjects. Because of your lack of decisiveness, they are now helpless. So you must learn to accept a situation. And that is a very important quality of a devotee." Our acharyas tell us very nicely, there's a popular saying in India, a housewife teaches the daughter-in-law by teaching the daughter. If a new daughter-in-law comes into the house, mother-in-law wants to be careful not to insult her, or she wants to teach her something, but sensitive situation. What does she do? She calls her daughter in and tells her, "Hey, you must put the things back like this. You must put the things back like that." And in that way, the daughter-in-law says, "Okay, so this is what mother-in-law wants. So that's what we should do." So these great devotees who suffered like Bhishmadev, who suffered like Parikshit Maharaj, who had to face trials and tribulations like the Pandavas, they were what we call the daughters. And the Lord teaches the world by teaching the devotee. Actually, devotees don't have to learn anything new from the Lord, not the great devotees in Bhagavatam, but they teach us, but the Lord teaches us through them actually. So whenever we see great devotees like Bhishmadev, we may question why he was there, why he didn't do this, but think of the lessons we are learning from him. And in that way, a devotee's duty is ungrudgingly, he or she accepts whatever the Lord gives as his plan. And Bhishmadev said, "Accept now the responsibility of king without hesitation, and you must take it up." And that is why for a devotee, whether he is placed in difficult situation or in a favorable situation, this duality is the same to him. Because in both cases, who does he turn to? He only turns to Krishna. He doesn't turn to anyone else. He turns to the devotees of the Lord. And in that way, the Lord protects his mind. The Lord protects his consciousness. And so this is what Bhishmadev said. After speaking those 4 shlokas, this is what he said. And this verse is the beginning of the end of Bhishmadev. Iti matir upakalpita vritishna bhagavati sarvata pungave vibhumi swasukham upagati kvachid vihartum prakritim upeyushiyat bhava pravaha. And this was his first and his most important prayer before he leaves the world. Let me now invest my thinking, feeling, and willing, which was so long engaged in different subjects and occupational duties, in the all-powerful Lord Sri Krishna. Krishna is always self-satisfied. But sometimes, being the leader of a devotees, he enjoys transcendental pleasure by descending in this material world, although from him only the material world has come. So the final point here is Bhishmadev is like an investor. He's telling all of us that we live our lives investing so much of our thinking, feeling, and willing in so many things. And it's true. For so many years, he had to get Vichitravirya married. He had to make sure his father was happy. He had to fight and win 3 princesses. Then one of them, Amba, became angry with him. He had to fight Parashuram. He had to navigate the difficulties and diplomacies of the kingdom of the Kauravas. So he had so many duties. But he never forgot Krishna. And now at the point of his time to leave, he says, let me invest. Investment means when you put money in, you should get something more than your principal, isn't it? And that is the beauty of bhakti. When we invest our thinking, feeling, and willing in Krishna, Krishna reciprocates many, many, many times. And these are the 2 foundations of devotional service. One is mercy. It is so nicely stated that the Supreme Lord is not obtained by expert explanations, not even by intelligence, not even by hearing. He is only obtained finally when he chooses you, when he gives mercy to you. So you may think, if that's the case, what can we do to attract the mercy of Krishna? If Krishna is so powerful that even though I'm powerful, he will not accept my explanations, my intelligence, but he will only accept me by mercy. How do we attract the mercy of Krishna? We attract the mercy of Krishna by not becoming attached or averse to this world, by seeing his hand in everything, by controlling our senses according to his instructions, and by performing devotional service. And in that way, we can attract and obtain the complete mercy of Krishna. There's a nice saying, whatever bhajana and sadhana that you have performed throughout your life, at the time of death, you will be tested. Because death is the true test of all that we have been through our lives. We cannot cheat Yamaraj, and we definitely cannot cheat Krishna. Bhishmadev experienced so many reversals in his life. He bore so many insults. Even till today, people insult Bhishmadev. He was on the side of the Kauravas. Even till today, we say that. But it never deviated him from accepting the plan of the Lord. He was destined to have a difficult life in this world, but he finally invested all his thinking, all his feeling, all his willing as a pure devotee of the Lord. He spoke on so many different topics. He fought so many battles, but his mind and heart always was fixed on his object of worship, and that was Krishna. And that's why when he lay on the deathbed, he had no anxiety and he had no agitation. And that's why I wanted to repeat this verse to you. This is the mood of a devotee. Devotee never blames anyone, doesn't waste time, uses his heart, his mind, his body, and just stays focused on the Lord. And these are our takeaways. If anything happens to us in this world, it is temporary and it's because of time. But bhakti is the highest activity we can perform, and time cannot take bhakti away from us. Even though we may have challenging situations, bhakti will protect our remembrance of Krishna. And even though destiny is very powerful, Bhishmadev was destined to suffer, but he was always under Krishna's shelter. And that's why at the end of his life, who was there before him? Krishna appeared before him. I like this point about Bhishmadev. He lived in this world, which was very muddy, but like a lotus flower which was not touched by the mud, he was not of this world, because his deeds, his words, his thoughts were always dwelling on Krishna. And he accepted the results of himself actually being on the opposite side. He was ready when Krishna came down from the chariot to be killed by Krishna. That's the difference between devotee and demon. A devotee may not be perfect, but his perfection is that he's always interested in satisfying the Lord. Jai Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki. Jai Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Can we have some nice points from your Prabhus, Matajis? Very happy to see you. When you put on your videos, I become happy, because then I can see some faces at least.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, how are you?
I am good, Prabhu. I have one question for you. Actually, I have a few, but I'll ask one. Let me start with that.
Sure.
I think several times during today's discourse, we talked about Krishna's instruction, right? And a lot of time that has come in. So I wanted to ask you one thing, that if you are to relate out of Bhagavad Gita, one superseding instruction of Krishna which we could apply at any situations in our life, what would that be?
That's a very interesting question. I've never had anyone ask me that question before. Maybe because there's so many good verses in Bhagavad Gita, you're making me think about which one I would. Personally, Prabhu, I would take one verse. I would take the verse from 9:22 of Bhagavad Gita. Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janaha paryupasate tesham nitya abhiyuktanam yogakshemam vahamyaham. 9:22.
922.
9:22. You look it up when you can.
Sure.
But very briefly, the verse tells us something nice. The verse tells us, Krishna says, Ananyas, if you perform bhakti in such a way that you are determined to find the goal, and the goal is to render bhakti to Krishna and his devotees. If you do not waver in your bhakti, then Krishna says, I guarantee you two things. Whatever that you have, I will preserve. Sometimes people get scared that when they take up to spiritual life, they will lose their job. They won't be able to do their material duties nicely. But look at Bhishmadev, look at the Pandavas, look at Janak Maharaj, look at all the great kings. They were masters at their work, but they were masters of being devotees. So the first guarantee Krishna gives us, which I feel most practical, when I read Bhagavad Gita when I was very young, this is the one I liked. Because my mother told me, if you read Bhagavad Gita when you're 13 years old, you won't do well in your studies. You become Sadhu Baba. So I read Bhagavad Gita secretly. And when I came to this verse, I showed it to her and I said, Mom, in this verse, Krishna tells us one thing. If you become a devotee, sincere and serious devotee of Krishna, Krishna says, whatever that you currently have, I will not take away. In other words, I am currently a student and I'm doing well in my studies. He will not compromise that. He will not make me lose something. That is a mark of someone who loves you, isn't it? Someone who loves you never take away anything from you. Rather, they always give you something. That is a mark of genuine love in this world. The other kind of love is exploitation. I say I love you, but I take everything from you. So Krishna is so kind. He says, I will preserve what you have. You can live with your family. You can have loving relationships with the world. You just put me in the center before you start anything. That's all. Before you start your work, your project, you remember me. In between your work, you remember me. At the end of the work, you finish it, do your best and offer it to me and say, Krishna, I've done what I can. It's in your hands now, my Lord. Now I am free. Let me concentrate on bhakti. What is so difficult? So I like that one point. And the second point I like, Prabhu, is after he says, I preserve what you have, he then says, I give you what you lack. You know, I'm a lawyer, and one of my specialties is to do deed of guarantees. And I tell you, I've never seen a deed of guarantee better than the one that comes in 922. Because this deed of guarantee is amazing. You keep all you have, not interested in taking from you. On top of that, whatever you don't have, I'll give you also. It's complete. I've never seen something more complete. So every time I've met students, I've met devotees, I've met anyone, when I share with them this amazing thing about bhakti, they really stop and think, you know what? This is something to think about. So that's my personal verse that I like.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Neeraj Prabhu, you can always send me the messages. Huh?
Yeah, sure.
I'm happy to take questions on that. But I wanted to open the floor to anyone else if you have any questions. Or if not a question, maybe you can tell me this night's exercise. If you were to take 1 point home today in one line, what would it be? What would it be? If there's something you will take in your heart today, what will it be? Sanjeev Prabhu, what will you take back with you?
Everything is happening as per Lord's plan. Respect the
Very
plan.
nice point. Everything is happening as per Lord's plan. That's a nice point. Who else? Who else would like to say something? Is Rahul Prabhu there?
Respect the time.
Respect time. That's a nice point, Prabhu. Who is that? I'm sorry, I didn't see.
This is my dad, Prabhu. Sanjeev said.
Oh, nice point. Yes, we must respect time because time is very powerful and time is not different from Krishna. Those who respect the value of time, they use it well. Those who never respect the value of time, time runs from them. Very nice point. What else?
Hi, Prabhu. I'm here, but I'm kind of multitasking within my laptop.
Don't worry,
Finished some
Prabhu.
report for
That's
office.
also
so
another
I'm
nature of
up
time.
here.
We have to multitask in time also. It's okay. I'll take that as your takeaway.
Thank you.
What other points? One more person.
Prabhu, can I add?
Please, Mataji.
Prabhu, love the Lord's devotees. So you gave us examples of Hanuman. You gave us examples of in Mahabharata. You mentioned about
Vibhishana.
Krishna. So it is, give your give the love and the respect to, like for Hanuman, we have to love the Lord's devotees.
Yeah, very important. If you render, if we have great love for the Lord's devotees, in fact, the Lord becomes even more happy. There's a saying even in material world, when the father is there and there's a child, but when the father sees that the child is getting so much love from his peers, the father doesn't mind if they don't pay the father any attention, because the father is so happy that they're paying attention to his child. And that's how Krishna is. Krishna is not an egoist at all. In fact, Krishna is the humblest personality. If he finds a devotee is glorified by all of us, he becomes so happy with that devotee. And that's why we can learn so much from great devotees. And we can learn so much from the world. Frankly speaking, Mataji, you brought up a very deep point. Who is a devotee? A devotee is someone who tries to follow the principles of Krishna. But it is also stated in Shastras that even a person who chants even one time the name of the Lord is to be respected as devotee. Another point for your consideration, in everyone's heart, Krishna resides. So actually everyone has the potential to be a devotee. So when we are friendly with all living entities, when we try to serve them to the best that we can, Krishna actually becomes very pleased with this mood. And it is the experience of Bhagavatam that he will reveal his plan to us. And if he can't reveal his plan immediately, don't worry, discuss it with the devotees. And through the devotees, my experience is, you will find out the plan of Krishna. That is why we want sadhu sangha. And that's why we're all here, just to take sadhu sangha. A very nice point. Please keep these slides. Dinavatsa Prabhu will send it. It's been recorded also. Whenever any calamity or challenge comes to you and you want to remember the verses, look into this slide. Bhishmadev crystallized how to handle time, how to handle reverses, how to face challenges, and how to obtain the mercy of the Lord. These are so practical instructions, and even till today, they are relevant actually. Thank you very much for your time. Next week, we will do something very interesting. We will do the conversation between Vidura and Dhritarashtra. Dhritarashtra did not want to give up his throne. Vidura came all the way back just to tell him, you're a foolish man, fool number one. You have to give up your throne. And their conversation is a very important part of the first canto of Bhagavatam. Okay?
Looking forward to it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you,
Have a good weekend. And join us for Snan Yatra whenever you can. Huh?
Prabhu, tomorrow, what time is the kirtan? Do you know, Prabhu, what time is your kirtan tomorrow?
The kirtan, Prabhu, will be anywhere between 6:30 to 7:15, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
I think children will spend about 15-20 minutes. So I think between 6:45 and 7:15 probably. Why don't I do one thing? I'll get the program, Prabhu, and I'll send it to you by WhatsApp. Send it to the group so that you can just see it there, and we will know at which point are the programs.
Yeah. So instead of our evening kirtan, people can just dial into this kirtan tomorrow.
Yes, they can. That'll be fine.
Prabhu, we can go enter the temple now, Prabhu. They have opened up. Are they allowing?
Not yet, Mataji. What we are doing now is we are disinfecting the place, we are cleaning the place, and we want to be a bit conservative because phase 1 is a very tricky phase. If it spikes up again, right, and they put more, they put back the circuit breakers, then we would have brought Jagannath into the temple and then bring him outside again. Right now, Jagannath is being worshipped in one of our senior devotees' house. So we want to make sure everything is ready before we go in. So I'm also very anxious. We're all anxious. Let's pray.
Yes.
Tomorrow is the day Jagannath appeared in this world. So it's a good day to pray to him, actually. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Krishna.